Willa of the Wood, Chapter 2. Once inside the walls of the lair, Willa scurried out of the moonlight filtering in through the window. She hunkered down on the floor in the shadowed corner of the eating place, the small quills on the back of her neck rising up as her eyes scanned the darkness for danger. Where's the biting dog, she wondered. Are all the Dayfolk upstairs in their beds? Holding her breath, she slithered across the floor and looked out into the main room of the lair for attackers. She waited, she watched, and she listened. If they caught her here, actually inside their lair, they would kill her. They had hacked the trees of the forest and hunted the animals. They had murdered her mother, her father, her twin sister, and so many others of the Dead Hollow lair. The Dayfolk did not think, they did not hesitate. Whether it was the wolves who howled to find their loved ones in the night, or the great trees who raised their limbs to the sun, the Dayfolk killed whatever they did not understand. And they understood very little of the forest into which they had come. As she pulled in a slow and steady, tightly controlled breath, she heard the sound of the small metal wound machine ticking on the fireplace mantel, and the slow hiss and crackle of the dying embers that had led her here to the lair. The scent of something startlingly sweet reached her nose. She tried to ignore it, but her stomach growled. She turned to see a round, stone-like container sitting on a flat wooden surface above her. She knew she shouldn't let this distract her, but she'd been so hungry yesterday and all through the night. She quickly rose up, lifted the container's lid, and gobbled down several of the small, crumbly lumps inside like a ravenous raccoon. As her mouth watered with the sweet flavor, she couldn't help but smile, but she was careful not to leave any crumbs that the Dayfolk might notice. She wanted to eat more of the lumps, but she stuffed half of what remained into her woven reed satchel and hurried on her way. As she snuck into the main room, she noticed a rectangle of tin with a modeled depiction of several of the Dayfolk, as though they had looked into their reflection in the pool beside the river and never escaped. A clean-shaven man, a dark-haired woman, two little ones, maybe 5 and 6 years old, and a tiny crawler in the woman's arms. But Willa didn't look at them for long, because she didn't like to think about their souls inside the metal. Get what you came for, she told herself, and pressed on. Glancing nervously at the stairway as she worked, she quickly searched the room for valuables. She found a small wooden box filled with a moist brown substance that she was pretty sure was chewing tobacco. She stuffed half of it into her satchel. It wasn't the kind of taking she was keen for, but she knew the Padaran, the leader of her clan, would be pleased by this special gift. She could see herself standing before his looming figure as she emptied her satchel in front of him, his eyes gleaming with approval. Feeling pleased with herself, she continued on. In a very small, tightly enclosed room filled with nothing but clothing hanging down from the strange shoulder-like shapes, she found a long, dark overcoat with a leather wallet and coins in the pockets, and she smiled. She took half the bills and half the coins. These were the takings the Padaran had trained her to find. The Padaran set her and the other jetters, the young hunter-thieves of the clan, out each night, and he gave his love to the ones who returned with their satchels full of coins or anything else of value. She glanced at the stairway again, knowing that when danger came, it would come down those stairs. She'd already had a good take, and she knew that a wise jetter left when the leaving was good, but she wanted more. When she'd returned to Dead Hollow the night before, her satchel had been light, and the Padaran had struck her face so hard with the back of his hand that she'd fallen to the ground, astonished and ashamed to be wiping the blood from her mouth. Over the last few months, she thought that she had become his favorite, but now he had struck her just as he did to the other jetters, and she still felt the fire of it on her cheek. Tonight she wanted more than she had ever taken before, to prove to the Padaran and the rest of the clan what she could do. Finally, she went over to the bottom of the stairs, cupped her hands behind her ears, and closed her eyes, listening to the rooms above. She heard a man snoring, and there were probably other Dayfolk up there too, a little clutch of them sleeping away the night. But where's the dog? She wondered again. The dog is death. She'd run into trouble with the fanged beasts before, with their loud barking and their vicious, biting, scratching attacks. I can smell the wretched creature around here someplace, she thought. I used its door to get in, but where is it? Why hasn't it come charging out at me with its snapping teeth? Most of her fellow jetters stole things from unattended wagons, midnight yards, and dark morning barns when there were no Dayfolk around. Very few ever dared to sneak into the Dayfolk's lairs, and none would do it when the Dayfolk were actually inside. The jetters had been trained to go out together in small groups and to never take such risks. But she put her foot on the first step and began to creep up the creaky wooden staircase, treading as lightly as she could on the strangely flat surfaces, so unlike anything she encountered in the forest. When she reached the top of the stairs, her legs trembled as she inched slowly through a narrow, cave-like tunnel toward the open doorway of the first room. In the forest, she could use her camouflage and her other powers, but her powers didn't work in the inner world of the Dayfolk. Here she could see and be captured. She could be killed. Her palms were sweating as she slowly peeked into the sleeping man's room. She had noticed on her other takes that the Dayfolk seemed to sleep in twos, but this man was sleeping alone on one side of the large bed, as if the one he slept with was gone. But there beside him was the biting dog she was looking for, a shaggy black and white fiend lying fast asleep beside its master, its white fangs and sharp claws visible in the moonlight. The man's face was bristled with whiskers, and he was lying on top of the covers, his clothes torn and wrinkled as if he had collapsed there in exhaustion. A chair and a small table and other Dayfolk things had been knocked to the floor as if there had been some sort of struggle. There was a wound on the man's head and a mat of dried blood on the dog's shoulder. Seeing the blood, Willa's heart pounded heavily in her chest as she swallowed hard. Had they attacked one of the animals of the forest and been entangled in a battle? But then she frowned in confusion. If they had fought something in the forest, that wouldn't explain the knocked over furniture in the room. And then she saw it. Lying in the bed next to the man and his dog, there was a long piece of metal with a wooden stock and what looked like two iron pipes side by side. That's a killing stick, she thought, right there beside them. She drew in a ragged, unsteady breath and fought the urge to run.